Listen to the voice inside your head right now. It is constantly narrating, worrying, planning, and judging. For most of us, this frantic stream of daily anxiety feels completely normal. It's what we consider to be our self. The philosopher Alan Watts called this the skin-encapsulated ego. He pointed out a strange quirk in how we speak. We say, "I have a body," rather than "I am a body." We treat our physical form like a vehicle being driven by a separate, tiny passenger sitting somewhere behind our eyes. But that passenger is entirely made of thoughts. What we call my life is actually a continuous internal story we tell ourselves to maintain our identity. It is a compilation of memories, grievances, and future plans that we have to actively remember to keep alive. Because this identity is a mental narrative rather than a physical object, it operates under a severe vulnerability. If the story stops, the self as you know it will collapse. The breakdown usually begins with an extreme external shock. Intense psychological trauma, deep depression, or sudden personal loss can act as the catalyst for a total collapse of the self system. These events forcibly dismantle the building blocks of a person's identity. When your career, your social status, or your closest relationships are stripped away, the structural integrity of your constructed self goes with them. Psychologists at Binghamton University have documented exactly what happens next. Their research shows that under this intense pressure, a person's ordinary sense of self, their very first-person perspective, begins to mysteriously fade from view. When the mind registers that its identity is disintegrating, it reacts with absolute panic. It frantically grasps at old habits, titles, and thought patterns, desperately trying to hold the familial narrative together. This reaction is much heavier than severe anxiety. It is the raw, existential terror of realizing that the protective walls of your reality are failing, and you cannot stop it. Your ego operates like a highly advanced survival program. When it senses its own demolition, it screams for its life, fighting to maintain the illusion of control. This resistance triggers a psychological state known as depersonalization. The strict boundary between your internal mind and the external world breaks down, leaving you feeling entirely detached from your own actions. The Binghamton Ego Dissolution Scale quantifies this breakdown, dividing the experience into positive, unity, and negative, ego loss. Sliding into ego loss causes severe dissociation, leaving individuals entirely estranged from their surroundings, convinced they're losing their sanity. By stripping away your preferences, your history, and your beliefs, this phase reveals an uncomfortable truth. The identity you spent a lifetime building was never a permanent fixture. As remaining fragments of the ego fall away, you hit the absolute bottom of the breakdown. Mystics and philosophers have historically referred to this stage as the dark night of the soul. The symptoms here are entirely visceral. It feels like an unfathomable ache of emptiness, a total annihilation of the self, bringing intense, isolating suffering. The terror stems from a paradox. You realize you have nowhere left to stand. There is no solid ground of identity to anchor onto, no role to play, and no concept of who you are supposed to be. There is only one reliable survival mechanism for this phase. You cannot fight the breakdown. To get through it, you must willingly relax your entire mind into the pain of the dying ego. By surrendering to the emptiness, the void ceases to be a place of death. It becomes a necessary, agonizing clearing of the old, rigid self, making room for a state of pure awareness. If your ego is dead and your thoughts have finally stopped running, who is left in the dark to notice the emptiness? This illustrates witness consciousness, the state of pure, silent awareness that observes the mind's panic without participating. In this silence, the perspective shifts. You were never the frantic ego, but the silent observer watching thoughts go by. Surviving the psychological breakdown requires this shift in your vantage point. You must move from being the one who suffers to the one who simply observes the suffering. Returning to the real world with this new awareness requires what the spiritual teacher Ram Dass called nobody training. It is the practice of navigating daily life without constantly defending a fabricated identity. The goal here is not to permanently kill the ego, because you still need it to function in society. Instead, you dwindle it down. You turn it from a screaming master into a quiet, helpful servant. When the ego finally stops fighting for dominance, the terrifying bad trip of ego loss gives way to the opposite side of the psychological scale. Then you enter the state of unity. Unity brings a mystical sense of interconnectedness. You feel linked to other humans, to the natural world, and to the entire universe, paired with an overwhelming physical release and deep positive emotion. The constant, exhausting defense of my life finally stops. The terrifying death of your constructed mental narrative is the necessary precursor to discovering your actual boundless self.